what Raywat Deonandan thinks about it. He's an epidemiologist at the University of Ottawa and a frequent contributor to this show, lucky for us, in the past couple of months. Sadly, Raywat, we still need you because this thing hasn't gone anywhere and I guess is not going anywhere anytime soon. What was your first reaction to the school board's plans here in Ottawa? Did you like them?
Well, they're better than some other places. They could be better still. The spacing is definitely an issue. We need to have better spacing, fewer students in the class. We need to have a commitment to ventilation. That's, I think, not talked about enough, because we know that aerosol transmission is a real thing, and the best way to combat aerosol transmission is to have dilution of virus in the air, and we do that by having moving air and good filters. So upgrading some of these ancient HVAC systems is needed. And
yeah, but that's not going to happen between now and then, right? Probably didn't happen this summer.
But here's the thing, there's no reason you can't delay it a couple months. There's nothing magical about September 1st, whatever the date is, that says we have to start school on that day. We have it in our power to delay it a month to upgrade the facilities. So there's some strange political decisions from my standpoint that aren't entirely logical. I
would think, I don't know what their logic is, but I would imagine as the economy is opening up, Windsor now is finally moving into stage 3. Offices are starting to call people back. It probably coincides more with daycare needs than anything else.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, and which is a good way of thinking about it because that puts a fire under you to get it done right. But, the simplest way or the most effective way to keep schools safe is, as I've been saying every chance I get, you drive the caseload in the community as low as possible. And that means taking the necessary steps in the wider population to keep cases low. That means enforcing the mask wearing and the distancing and maybe not opening up bars and restaurants as much as we have been, unfortunately, or whatever it takes to keep us in single digits. If it's not around us, it can't get into the schools.
Right. That's interesting you say single digits because I quoted from an article yesterday, 20, I think, epidemiologists in the United States were asked about school, and 6 said they were leaning towards sending their kids back. 8 were on the fence. Another 6 said they weren't. That doesn't quite add up, does it? Yeah, that's 20. Okay. So did quick math on the air there. So 20 epidemiologists. But they all said the one thing in common, which was it really depends on the caseload in the community. You said single digits, but even that depends on, single digits across the country would be awesome, but single digits in my little town might not be so great. So is there a simpler way parents can look at it when they look at caseload to determine if the community is safe enough to send their kids to school?
There really isn't, unfortunately, and even the epidemiologists disagree what the thresholds are. I was looking at a proposed risk tool just the other day that looks at a variety of indicators, including the caseload, including the reproduction number, including the test positivity rate, including the hospital beds filled, and we use all of these in parallel to figure out what the actual risk in the community is. And even then we can't figure out what the numbers cutoff are. But it's going to vary depending on the size of your community. So I said single digits for Ottawa because to me that's, if we're single digits in Ottawa every day for a city the size of 1 million people, that's pretty good. I'd like to have it single digits per week if possible, and it is possible. But
we were there for a while, right?
Right, we were.
We weren't until house parties and bars and.
That's the thing with this disease. It changes instantaneously, as we see in New Zealand. They had 100 days of nothing, and now they've got a lockdown again. So this is why we can't mess around too much. There isn't a lot of margin for error here. So I'm a big fan of enforcing masks in school as well, even for the younger kids if we can. Whatever we can to keep people safe.
Okay, well, we're not an international or national show, so we have the luxury of looking at the numbers more realistically. My gut said pretty much what you're saying. I was more comfortable when we had 2 or 3 a day. 20 a day, 21 yesterday. That was up a bit from where we'd been. I'm less comfortable. If we're at this level, about, say, 10 to 20 a day in 3 weeks when the kids will go back to school. We'll talk about elementary school first. This is where the kids are in almost full classrooms, right? 30 kids. We don't know for sure because some will stay home and learn from home, but you could potentially have a pretty full class all day long. Would you send your kids in Ottawa 3 weeks from now, if nothing else has changed?
I would, only because they need childcare, right?
Right.
Small children. But also, if we're saying that the caseload has not changed, like it's not climbing, then that's a key observation as well. If it's 20 a day consistently, that's not great news, but it's not bad news because it means we're not climbing yet. We've got it under control to some extent. But I would look more at the number of tests that come back positive, the percentage of tests that come back positive. If it's less than 1%, then I'm confident that we're capturing the overwhelming majority, if not 100% of cases in the community. So I'm not that afraid of the asymptomatic carriers as much. But as that number creeps up, I get a little more worried. But yeah.
You also take into account hospitalization, ICU cases. Is that an indicator for you?
Not for schools necessarily, because for schools we're going to get the lesser serious cases. That won't manifest in the caseload in the hospitals, right? So right now the disease is showing growth in the mid-age ranges who are less likely to be hospitalized. And so that won't necessarily be indicated in the hospital figures, right? What we care about is if one of these lesser serious cases goes home and infects your grandmother, then it's a serious case.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about that because you've said, if nothing else changes, elementary school kids in Ottawa, you'd probably send them, and you said, but you have no choice with daycare. That sounds like a harsh way to make a decision. But that's the reality we're dealing with, right? Because life has to go on. People have to earn money. We have to feed our kids. We have to clothe them. We have to put a roof over their head. And it's a calculation we make every day anyway. You put them on a school bus, there's some risk. You send them into a school, they could get other diseases. They could be injured in an accident. So that's a calculation as cold-hearted as it sounds that we make every day, isn't it?
It's true. The difference, though, well, two differences. One is that, you don't have the risk of your kid bringing home a deadly disease as much as you have now. And two is we have the opportunity for the state to step in and lower the risk. And the frustration I think a lot of parents have is they don't see the responsiveness of the government in answering their concerns. We could spend more money to lower class size. We could mandate masks and face shields in the classroom. We could start, if not changing the HVAC system, buy a bunch of portable air purifiers for every class. A couple $100 for each class. That solves the problem.
Or mandate keeping the windows open until we get those systems upgraded because we have time before it gets really cold outside.
That's a really good point. Yeah, we have time still. I mean, we're treating this as a fait accompli, but there's still some time to mess around here.
Yeah. So let's talk about grandma or grandpa. Usually it's grandma because they tend to outlive men, but let's talk about our older, more vulnerable. If you're sharing a home with your children and their grandparents, for you, is that a game changer? The kids are just not going to school, or are there other ways you would protect them?
Yeah, I think I would think really long and hard about sending my kids to school if I had a vulnerable person in the household. And if I could keep them home, I would keep them home. If I can't keep them home, well, I'm going to be worried every day. And I'm going to make sure that, my kid wears a mask even if it's not mandated, and wears a face shield even if it's not mandated, because the mask protects outward protection and the shield prevents inward flow of the virus.
We have my mother-in-law living here. She's pretty healthy. She's about 80. And the first decision we made, instantly, we saw the plan yesterday. Our kids could take the school bus, but we can find a way to drive them to and from. So keep the school bus as empty as possible. We'll do our part. No chance of putting him in a car after school with grandmother. She's not doing the pick up and drop off. For me, that's too close quarters. Make sense?
Yeah, it does. But if they're living in the same household anyway, she's going to get exposed.
Yeah, but she's in a very separate part of the house that we prepared for and built for her. So, yeah, it's going to be like you can't sleep on grandma's couch tonight because you want to hang out. You can't do that. So we'll have to make rules as we go. All right, so we've dealt with elementary kids. High school is a different thing in Ottawa. The public school board, it looks like the kids are going 50% of the time. Catholic board is actually more like 25 because on the half days, the days they go, they only go half a day. That's to make sure the class sizes are smaller. They're not all leaving school at the same time, keeping them out of the hallways at the same time, all of those things. And again, the caseload somewhere where it is today, and it's hanging around 20 consistently. If you sent them to elementary school, I'm guessing you'd send them to high school as well.
Yeah, because I have faith in teenagers' ability to self-protect a bit more. So they can distance. They don't need to socialize as much. They can do so on their own time and through, online means and so forth. But they have the option of staying home. And I would rather they stay home and do their learning by distance, and then if need be, interact with people on a, as needs basis. So the older kids I'm not that concerned about because they don't need the daycare, as you put it. We do know, though, that high school kids are just as likely as adults to get and transmit the disease, if not more so, because they are far more social. So constraining their socialization is key.
Yeah, and that's going to be a tough one. But how do you balance off the, especially high school? They're getting close to college, university. The marks are starting to matter. I'm not convinced that they did. Well, I know they did a terrible job in the spring. I'll believe it when I see it. If I think the online component's working really well, and then the numbers start to go up for me, that's an automatic. Okay, it's working online. My kids are coming out. They're coming home. Would you do the same thing? Will you be flexible through the school year, and watch what happens?
Yes, that is the right way to do it. Be responsive to the changing scenario. I don't know how much the schools are going to allow a midstream change, though. I hope they are. I hope they're flexible.
Well, I'm not going to care. No, listen, I know that they're already telling you can't opt out now and then opt back in. I get that. But if we're going to opt in, but if I think the transmission in the community is too high, or the school's not dealing with it well, or I think the online component is safer, I'm pulling them out. Who's going to stop you as a parent? Good luck with that.
You do what's right for your kid, absolutely.
Yeah.
I will say that there's some things that are comforting here, right? Number one, the caseload is relatively low in the community, so the probability of encountering someone who's infectious is low. Second of all, you put the right public health procedures in place, the mask wearing and distancing, then your probability of actually getting it from someone who's infected comes even lower. Then there's the idea that kids, we think, might be a little less likely to get and transmit. That's debatable, but we think so. So that lowers the probability a little more. So the probability of something going bad is actually quite small. It's just that when it's scaled up to tens of thousands of kids, it's likely that someone's going to get it. Right? So I wouldn't panic. I wouldn't say that, we should be terrified for our vulnerable at home. It's just we're mitigating a risk, and the risk is still quite small. It's just that if it goes badly, it goes very badly.
Speaking about the younger kids, you mentioned we think that they're less likely to spread it. A lot of doubt crept in last week when that study of an overnight camp, I think it was Georgia, came out. A lot of parents shared that, I noticed, and said, that's it, game changer. I looked at it and thought, okay, well, I think it was 43 kids. It was an overnight camp, and they tested symptomatic kids. I don't know that that's the ultimate study that you can say, okay, game changer, kids are just as likely to pass it or more likely than anybody else. I didn't buy that. I think it gave you pause for thought, but I don't think any one study is going to settle this. It's not going to be you wake up one morning and go, oh, absolutely, 100% now we know the kids are not going to spread it. Everybody's safe.
That's right. So for the longest time, the narrative was kids don't get it and they don't spread it, which is clearly false. Kids can get it and they do spread it and they can die of it. And what we see is they do so to a lesser extent. But 3 caveats to those observations. Number one is almost all those studies are done in situations where the community load is low. Number 2 is that almost all the studies looking at kids not getting it and spreading it were done when schools were closed, so the kids were already protected. And number 3, as you mentioned, kids are 3 times more likely to be asymptomatic. So if you're only testing symptomatic cases, you're going to miss those instances where the asymptomatic child was the index case, the transmitter. So I don't trust a lot of the signs showing that the kids are completely safe.
But also, doesn't it make some common sense? And I know common sense and science don't always line up because I don't have all the facts. But if a kid is asymptomatic, they may be less likely to be coughing and sneezing, and so less likely to spread the disease. That doesn't mean, we can just breathe in some dust and sneeze. So I may have the disease, I'm asymptomatic, but I expelled the virus, even though I didn't have cold symptoms along with it. So doesn't that make some sense that if they're asymptomatic, they might be a little less likely to spread it?
That makes sense. And also they have smaller lungs and propel droplets less far. All these things add up. You're absolutely right. It's just a matter of how much, how much it matters.
Well, especially when you're in the same class with the same teacher all day long.
Yes. So duration of exposure, intensity of exposure also do matter. What we have to remember is The kids can get it and can spread it. And so if we give them an environment that allows them to do so and repeat that environment many, many times throughout the year, then it's likely it's going to happen at least once. So the question is, do we have the capacity to suppress it when it does happen? We should not be surprised when an outbreak happens in a school. What we should be surprised by is public health fails to isolate it and to prevent it from being a full-out emergency. Right? So don't panic when the inevitable cases occur. Panic when we fail to contain them.
One last one. Did you download the app, and would you have your kids download it when they go back to school?
I downloaded the app, and I encourage everyone to do so. The privacy concerns are minimal, and the potential for it to help us is good. I don't think it'll be a game changer, but every little bit helps, so why not?
Yeah, I have it. I haven't put it on my kids' phones yet, but they will definitely have it on their phones.
Good.
I don't see how it can hurt. Thank you for talking to us. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Dr. Raywat Deonandan is an epidemiologist at the University of Ottawa. Still